That was an exhausting weather forecast because there's a lot of exhausting weather about. Thanks very much, Joe. Now, writer Emma Wolfe and journalist James Bloodworth are with us for a look through this morning's papers. Let's start with the front... Good morning to you both. Sorry, how very rude. Let's have a look at the front page of the Times, James, first of all. This is a good, proper paper story, this, about a court case involving an alleged Russian spy.
Yeah, so the Times is saying that a Putin spy has infiltrated Britain's intelligence service. So it was someone who claimed asylum in Britain who basically worked as a double agent. He's now been stripped of his British citizenship.
He's an Afghanistan national at birth, is that right?
Yes, that's right. And he's been accused of spying for Russia's military intelligence agency and also working for GCHQ and MI6 in the UK. So, I mean, this is an ongoing problem. Russia's been on a Cold War footing since the end of the Cold War. We're only just catching on now to the fact that it's still trying to infiltrate our own intelligence services, our military. Some would say the House of Lords, for example, buying newspapers in this country. And this is another example of that.
I mean, the allegations in here are that he was being groomed from the age of 5.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things the Russian intelligence services have done. So, I mean, last year I interviewed Greg Hans, who's now the chairman of the Conservative Party, and there was an attempt at one point before he was an MP to recruit him and get him to take documents from the House of Commons library. There have been prospective Tory MPs taken over to Russia and attempts to take them to a strip club at one point. And yeah, I mean, every area of public life the Russians are attempting to infiltrate at the moment.
We know this, but when you see the details, it does feel alarming. The amount of access that these people and the influential people they gain influence with is really quite stark.
It is, and I also think this sort of feeds into the narrative at the moment that the Home Office, in terms of their monitoring and in terms of surveillance for any kind of immigration issues, is not fit for purpose. We've seen so many of these cases over recent weeks, and obviously we still have Abdul Shakur on the run. So, Abdul Azidi on the run. So this feeds into that. But also it's difficult with Russia, isn't it? Because there is a sort of side of them which is very much accepted and is in our society, and the Russian money and all of that, and the kind of the blurred lines between going to strip clubs and going out wining and dining, and then the kind of full-on, Russian infiltration. I mean, we do, as you say, we have, what do they call the guy who owns the Evening Standard?
Evgeny Lebedev. His father was a spy.
I mean, they're fully accepted into British society. They're part of our
Yeah, I mean,
part of the House of Lords.
It's partly because our economy depends on people with lots of money buying property in London. It has done. And
I mean, Knightsbridge is sort of 99.9% Russian.
But the way to deal with Russia has long been a problem since the end of the Cold War, when it stopped being an enemy. What did they become?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and this is why, and we're going to be talking about it later on the programme, this interview that Tucker Carlson did with Vladimir Putin is so contentious, because how do you handle Putin if he's sending people into this country? I mean, this chap apparently met the king when he was Prince Charles, and he had developed vetting when he worked at GCHQ. So embedded within the secret services and feeding information, allegedly feeding information back to the Russian state.
We will have more on that interview a little bit later. We believe they've done the interview, but it hasn't been released yet, so it's sort of in the can of being edited. So more on that to come. Emma, this is a highly sensitive, extremely controversial subject. Came up in the middle of Prime Minister's questions. The Mirror is saying the Tories are tone deaf. Shame on you. Was the Prime Minister tone deaf yesterday?
I think this has been whipped up. I think this has been weaponised by the papers and by Labour as well. This was yesterday, Rishi Sunak, in the kind of rough and tumble of PMQs, making a joke about the fact that Keir Starmer was not able, repeatedly, notoriously, not able to define what was a woman, whether a woman could have a penis, this whole trans row.
Should we just be absolutely clear what Rishi Sunak said? He said that one of Starmer's problems was defining a woman, although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. That's all he said on the subject.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, because Starmer had previously said 99.9% of women, he's moved on his position. He's U-turned, which is what Starmer is also famous for doing. 99.9% of women, OK, yes, they don't have male genitalia. But the problem was, to complicate the issue, the parents of, or the mother of Brianna Ghey was in the chamber, and so this is being seen as a sort of trans jibe, deeply insensitive trans jibe, at a time when they are obviously grieving just after the conviction and the charging of her murderers.
What's your take on it, Jane?
Sunak has doubled down and refused to apologise, and Labour are whipping it up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say Labour's whipping it up because the father of Brianna Ghey has said that he found this remark disgusting and that Rishi Sunak should apologise. I mean, I think there's...
Do you think he should apologise?
Yeah, I think so.
What for?
Because I think it's an inappropriate thing to say whilst Brianna's mother's in the chamber.
So it's the insensitivity of it.
Yeah, because I think there's a legitimate debate to be had about women's spaces and biological reality versus what someone identifies as. But I think you can have that debate without making trans people the butt of the joke, which is precisely what Rishi Sunak did.
Well, they weren't the butt of the joke. Starmer was for his
Brianna's father hasn't criticised Starmer. He's criticised Rishi Sunak for making that joke and said it's disgusting.
I'm not ignoring the parents, but I think that what parents say in the days and weeks following this kind of awful event is one thing, and I completely understand their grief and their very, very sensitive feeling to anything, but it wasn't actually joking about trans people at all. It was a joke about the fact that Keir Starmer has U-turned on this and many other issues, which I'm sure we'll come to in the next few stories, and that he was finally able to define what was a woman and what wasn't a woman. That's what Sunak was getting at.
I think Rishi Sunak then should refrain from, lavishing the parents of Brianna Ghey with all this praise then, if he doesn't actually respect what they say, because the father has said that he's disgusted by this and thinks he should apologise. So I think, Rishi Sunak should at least reflect on that.
Yeah.
It doesn't reflect well on him that that's been said, does it?
Maybe it was unwise. The Prime Minister hasn't had a very positive week for headlines or giving the opposition an easy goal to say, look, you took that bet with Piers Morgan, you've now been deeply insulting in the Commons. We're asking you at home this morning, should the Prime Minister apologise? Let us know what you think. You can text us, 87222, just start your message with the word talk. The thing that's interesting, Emma, and if we look inside the Telegraph for this, is yesterday could have been a really positive day for the Conservatives, because the Labour Party, after so much confusion of a policy that was announced months ago, all this funding, green investment, 28 billion, well, then it got very messy. Were they actually going to do this? Or were they just going to do it later if they won the general election? Yeah. And now, yesterday, clarity, oh, no, we're abandoning it.
Well, they're not. Yes, they're saying they're abandoning it. They're going to still say the party's committed to huge borrowing, but they're not standing by that precise figure.
I think they're committed to not making commitments.
Billion, exactly. Well, I know, and many of us feel that's what Starmer has been doing all along, that he hasn't actually given us any clear policies. The shadow cabinet is quite divided on this. They are still committed to green investment, to huge green investment. They're still committed to a lot of borrowing. But yeah, there is a clear sense, a clear indication that this pledge is being watered down, has been watered down. And it should have been, as you say, this should have been a brilliant time for the Tories' open goal for them to say, you know what, this party is not, Labour in waiting, is not actually, it doesn't have a credible plan for government. It's not a party fit for purpose, ready to take over. But of course, it's got confused by all sorts of other.
Yeah, but on the actual Green Pledge issue, are Labour right to abandon that 28 billion total? Have they been boxed into a political corner here? Because the argument was that it was investment, and if you obviously speculate, you accumulate. So could they not have stuck to their guns, or should they not have stuck to their guns here?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think they've rowed back from specifically the 28 billion figure, because then that can't be hung around their necks as a... I mean, I don't think it's very credible for the Tories to say Labour's going to increase taxes when we already have the highest tax burden since the end of the Second World War. So I think that's not... The Conservatives don't have a very strong footing on that score. But I think Keir Starmer's being extremely cautious. So there's not that figure. Because the green policies, this is an industrial strategy, and they haven't rowed back from that. They're just not putting a figure on it, so it makes it harder to actually attack them on it.
Hostage to fortune.
Yeah. And then they'll come back and say, well, we don't have, we're not in we can't get inside the Treasury yet. It's this endless kind of, we won't know until we're actually
the challenge of saying we don't have all the details, so therefore we can't give fully costed ideas.
Exactly.
And then when they do, the Conservatives come at them. So it's a slightly tricky balance they're trying to play. You use the word cautious, James, but for the public, is that going to be enough? Because what they really want is clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably will, because, I mean, the Labour's had been at 40% for over 18 months now. So, I mean, it's overly cautious. He probably doesn't need to be this cautious. But at the same time, it's not completely wrong either, because if the Tories do unveil tax cuts to try and sweeten the electorate, then we don't know how the public finances are going to be in 9 months' time. So, I mean, you can't always, put a figure on it now, because you don't know what the government's going to do in the meantime.
And although many people know that we need investment and we need more green policies, with the public, it's not overwhelmingly a popular thing to say we're going to, as you say, raise your taxes to spend 28 billion on green investment. That doesn't go down well with voters. So they really don't want to take this lead, this massive lead, for granted.
OK, very quickly, one more story. This is on the front page of the Daily Express, Emma. Has the Prime Minister opened the door to an amazing Boris comeback?
Yeah, well, this is actually James's story, isn't it, about the Prime Minister saying that he wouldn't rule out Boris Johnson having a role. I think it was having a role in future.
I was always taught that when the headline's got a question mark on the end of it, try the answer no.
And also, a stunning move, you think, come on.
Yeah,
really?
It feels a bit of a kind of they've invented this as a story.
Yes.
I mean,
right?
Because he actually said not a lot.
Yeah, and his reputation kind of collapsed with Partygate. I think he was at minus. His favourability was minus 42 when he left office. I think Rishi Sunak is, you know, very unpopular, but he's not that unpopular yet. I just think that would be quite crazy. I think, why would he do that? I mean, he's brought Cameron back. Cameron was a relatively popular figure, unless you supported Brexit. But he was, Cameron, you know, is a kind of seasoned hand. I don't think he'd want that psychodrama of bringing Boris back.
And
why
it's got too much political gravity, hasn't he, that could draw attention away from everything.
But also, hang on a minute, who does Sunak think he is? I mean, he's not going to have any power. So it's a kind of interesting question. Has the Prime Minister opened the door to about a Boris comeback? Well, in what shape or form?
We'll just say, nice try,
welcome
Daily
it.
Express, but no one here is buying it.
But do you think the public would welcome it?
It's an interesting one. Would they welcome Nigel Farage? I mean, we have these really, really popular figures, sort of leaders, who are sort of almost more than politicians. Farage is overwhelmingly popular in some ways, and yet he's failed to be elected, you know, 7 times? So are they decent politicians? Not really. I mean, are they good, or are they just really kind of... I mean, when Farage appeared at the Conservative Party conference, he was absolutely mobbed. When he does I'm a Celebrity, he wins, you know, comes third. He is very, very popular.
It's like
Boris
a niche
Johnson...
popularity, though, I think. Like, they're very popular with true believers, but Sunak wants to be that kind of to present as kind of the centre ground, which you need to do.
They're
to
very
win
divisive,
You can't just be this niche popular figure.
I think Boris Johnson's Marmite, isn't he?
Indeed. Well, look, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed to both Emma and James. They'll be back in just under an hour.